have nothing. I who have no one.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new episode of Chatting with Lady C. Hello Mum, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, honey. And you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
I really like the necklace and the earrings.
And the bracelet
Oh,
and
yes,
the
I
ring.
do. Yes.
It's a parole. There's also a tiara. And so many people have asked me to wear really nice stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's a huge palaver to get access to the nice stuff and to get it in and then to wear it and then to take it and get it safely delivered where it needs to be. So it's out of harm's way. That's so, but I thought I'd do it, and also but not with the tiara. I thought that would be
Just a bit much.
Yeah, well, I actually think this is a bit much. I mean, I sort of think this is my Elizabeth Taylor look. A caftan, fabulous jewels. I mean, if one wore this with something else, it would be different. But, since this is at home, it has to be relaxed, which really is very Elizabeth Taylor. And she was not known for always hitting the right note taste-wise. So I'm slightly mocking myself, but there we go.
All right.
So now also, I suppose, while I'm on the subject of, being responsive to what people have asked for, several people have asked about that picture above the mantelpiece in the background. It is by the greatest marine painter of all time, Konstantin Ivanovich Aivazovsky. He was a Russian painter who painted primarily in the latter part of the 19th century, second half of the 19th century. And that is one of his rarer pictures of Venice. He didn't do many of Venice. He did a few. And according to Eugene, that makes it far more desirable. I love it. Do you like it?
Yeah, it's a very nice picture.
I love it. That's right. It's over the mantelpiece in the family drawing room. So, what do you have for me today, honey?
So for our questions today, Mary Clarke, nanny to Princess Diana, and her brother Charles Spencer went to the trouble of contacting the Sunday Times to deny his claims about their mother. You have written extensively on this subject. What can you tell us about where the truth lies?
Well, it's, we seem to be living in a world where there are an awful lot of people with false memories, because we live in a world where victimhood has become very desirable, and overprivileged people who really should be grateful for the blessings that life has endowed them with are busy bleating about how deprived they are. Diana had that tendency, and her brother Charles does as well. And Mary Clarke, I quote Mary Clarke in both my Diana biographies. She was the most successful of all of the nannies for those two Spencer children. And they were a living nightmare to all of the other nannies, but they were not with her. And she went to great lengths to point out in the Sunday Times article that she approached them to right the wrong that had been done by Charles Spencer about his mother, but had also been done previously by Diana. That their mother wasn't maternal, that their mother abandoned them. It's all in my book, The Real Diana. Frances Shandkid did not abandon those children. She left their father when she fell in love with Peter Shankid, and she took the two children for the first several months with the nanny. She took them back for Christmas, and Johnnie Spencer, who was then Johnnie Althorp, her husband at the time, he was not yet Lord Spencer, he refused to allow her to take the children back to London. She then sued him for a divorce, alleging a cruelty because he used to beat her up. He countersued, alleging adultery. Her mother, Ruth Lady Fermoy, who was an insuperable snob, she was a great friend of Richard Adeney, who was one of Uncle Mickey's best friends, and in fact Uncle Mickey left him money when he died. And Richard Adeney was a wealth of information about Ruth when I was writing my first and second Diana books. Ruth testified against her daughter and said the reason why she did it was she did not want her children being brought up in Australia by her whore of a daughter and her wallpaper merchant husband. She wanted them safe and sound on the Sandringham estate where Diana was born and where the family lived, in Park House, which had been given to the family by King George V and Queen Mary, if I remember correctly, because Ruth's husband and Ruth were friends of the Duke and Duchess of York at the time, who became King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. And to not divert too much, Ruth betrayed her daughter for snobbish reasons. She wanted the children to be a part of the royal world, and they did remain a part of the royal world. And to her, it was a price well worth paying. Frances never got over it. There are stories that I was told that I recount, including stories told by Diana herself, that every time the children had to be handed back, their mother would cry and she was distraught. She didn't want to hand them back. Yet Charles Spencer had the unmitigated gall in an interview to say that his mother wasn't maternal. And so I'm delighted that Mary Clarke approached the Sunday Times because, it's unfair. Frances is not alive now. So you could say it doesn't really matter. Well, I'm sorry, you do not dishonor your mother's memory unfairly. What was interesting is that Mary Clarke made the point in the article that after Frances lost custody of those children, there was another trial where she tried to regain custody of them. The children knew nothing about this. Both parents protected the children against the infighting that was going on behind the scenes to an extent. Not to the extent that they didn't know that there was tremendous animosity between their parents, and it did definitely mark both Charles and Diana. But I'm delighted that Mary Clarke went to the trouble of redressing the balance because, we need to recalibrate our values in this modern world. There is nothing admirable about being a victim when you are not one. And there is nothing admirable about claiming to be deprived when you are privileged. And there is nothing acceptable about being an ingrate when you should be grateful. You know, people need to get their values straight. They need to be grateful for what they should be grateful for and condemnatory for what they need to condemn. And the two cannot meet. And you cannot confuse the two without confusing yourself. But this also shows why Harry, to an extent, is the complete mess he is, because he has been brought up in a world by a mother and by an uncle in part, neither of whom has a handle on or had a handle on the realities of their situation. And instead of being grateful when they should be, were busy bleating when they should not. So on that note, what do you think of what I said?
I think she is right. If they've said something that she disagrees, and she was the nanny, so she was there quite a lot, and she would have seen a lot of going on, and she thinks that they were being nasty about the subject, and she wanted to just get the truth out there. I think she did right.
Yeah, but neither Charles nor Diana was ever prepared to give credit where it was due. It's just iniquitous. Next question, Harry.
No worries. So for our next question today, Colleen McCollum, Lady C, can you put to rest the idea that Prince Harry is Charles's son and not James Hewitt? There have been recent reports that Diana knew James Hewitt 2 years before Harry's birth, which makes it likely that the resemblance between the two of them is more than accidental. Do you know who Harry's father is? Is it James Hewitt or Prince Charles? Do you know James Hewitt? What did the Princess Diana say about this?
Well, very interesting question, and very timely considering the fact that Harry has been brought up all his life with questions about his paternity, but he has colluded with Meghan in introducing questions about his own child's birth and has allowed questions to be asked that should never have been asked, which means that it doesn't bother Harry at all, or he's indifferent to the consequences of possible disturbance to his son. I know James Hewitt. You know James Hewitt. You most likely don't remember James Hewitt, but he used to come to Bourne Street occasionally when you children were young. He's a very nice man. He has been much maligned, and he was completely thrown under the bus by Diana over my first Diana book. But this is not the time to get into that. If people want me to explain what happened, I'm very happy to do it at some future date. James told me on more than one occasion, and Diana told me as well, that they first met at a drinks party at Hazel West, who was one of her ladies in waiting. Now, Hazel West and I have Jamaican friends in common who also have confirmed this. So I don't know why a mystery has arisen about this. That there is no doubt that Harry is Prince Charles's son. James himself said that he was not his father, that he didn't know Diana at the time of Harry's conception. You only need to look at Harry to see the placement of his eyes in his skull relative to his nose and his forehead to see that that is a Mountbatten placement. Look at Prince Charles's photographs. Look at Lord Mountbatten's photographs, who was Prince Charles's great uncle, his grandmother's brother. And you will see the Battenberg placement directly passed down to Harry. That's one thing. James is a redhead, and so is Harry. But Harry looks very much like Diana's sister Sarah, who's also a redhead. Charles Spencer, her brother, has touches of ginger as opposed to being a flagrant redhead, as did their father, Johnnie Spencer. These rumours make for very interesting chatter and interesting reading, but I am afraid they are just rumours. Diana did have a flirtation with somebody between the birth of William and Harry, and if I recall correctly, it is in my first Diana book. If it's not in my first Diana book, it most likely is in my second Diana book. So it's either Diana in private or the real Diana, or in both. It's too long ago and I've written too much to remember what I wrote then. And also, as I've said before, when you write something, it gets edited, it gets changed, and you really don't remember what the edited product is. You might remember what you've written, but I mean, we're now speaking about 30 years ago. So I'm afraid that I do not remember absolutely everything I wrote in two books 30 and 20-something years ago. I just don't. I would be inhuman if I could remember such detail. But Diana did have a flirtation with Henry Pembroke. Now, I first met Henry Pembroke in 1975 at a party at Elizabeth Balfour, as she was then known as, Princess Elizabeth of Yugoslavia, who was trying to set me up with Henry. He was recently divorced. She thought he was the ideal Barbara Cartland hero, which he was. He was very tall, very good looking. I felt no click, and so I wasn't interested. Diana felt a click, and they had a flirtation. But there is no doubt that both those boys are Charles's sons. And Diana, you know, was not dumb. And there is no way she would have jeopardized her position or her children's prospects by dropping illegitimate children that were so close to the succession to the throne. Had it been child number 3 or 4 or 5, it might have been another matter. But child 1 and 2, no. I mean, she was an aristocrat, and she did know the rules of the game, and she did play by them when it suited her, and it certainly suited her to have legitimate children. So I hope that this is the end of the matter, but I know it's not going to be, because this is like a bad penny that keeps on popping up this story every few years. You know, it's already so. Next question, honey.
So for our final question today, Caramela Bohm, did you curtsy to Wallis? The Duke always wanted this.
I certainly did curtsy to Wallis. I dropped a deeper curtsy to Wallis every time I saw her than I ever dropped to the Queen. And I did it deliberately because I felt that Wallis had been treated very unfairly. She really was legally and by right a Royal Highness. The Duke of Windsor, it was very important to him that everybody acknowledged her regal status, and I saw absolutely no reason to not do so. And I always did it willingly, happily, and with alacrity. And I should also say, while I'm on the subject of Wallis, that when I spoke about her the last time, I neglected to say a very important thing. A comparison between Wallis and Meghan that shows how completely divergent they were as characters. Wallis was not really motivated by money the way Meghan is motivated by money. Wallis was also not hypocritical and disingenuous and, speaking through one side of her mouth when in fact she's going through the other. Wallis was not two-faced. If you knew her or read her autobiography, she's very upfront about the fact that she loved the things of this world. And she did. She had superb taste. And she was known to be the greatest hostess on earth. And she really was the greatest hostess on earth. And she was tremendously stylish and loved luxury. But she always put her principles first, and I'll tell you how I know this to be a fact. When Wallis was married to her first husband, Win Spencer, he was an alcoholic and he used to beat her up. And they were separated, then they got back together and the beatings continued and she separated from him finally. She was in China for the reunion, so to speak, with Win Spencer. She went back to America and decided she wanted a divorce. Her uncle Saul, who was one of the richest men in America, and she was his sole heiress, said to her, Wallis, a Warfield has never been divorced. You cannot be divorced. If you divorce your husband, I am going to cut you out of my will. He was worth $2.5 million, which was maybe 200 or 300 million today. And she said, well, Uncle Saul, sorry, I cannot be married to him. He beats me up. I want to be married to someone else. And he said, no, you have to wait. You cannot divorce. You have to lead the life of the typical Southern lady whose marriage hasn't worked. And she refused to do it. She got her divorce. He cut her out of the will. He also said to her, Wallis, if you divorce Win Spencer, I am going to leave my money to a home for fallen women. And did. So, he made it absolutely clear that as far as he was concerned, Wallis was a fallen woman. Not because she would have had an affair on the side, but because she had divorced her husband and he left his money to a home for fallen women. But for that, Wallis would have been one of the great heiresses of her day. She would have been richer than Gloria Vanderbilt, who was known as one of the great heiresses of her day. That tells me, I don't know what it tells you, but it tells me that Wallis couldn't be bought and that she would not sell her soul for worldly gain. She also had tremendous respect for the institution of the monarchy. And she replicated for David, once they were married, a regal lifestyle, very consciously, and everything was absolutely comme il faut. And she was punctilious about absolutely everything. Well, Meghan, of course, has thrown two fingers to the world where royalty is concerned in the royal way. And also, there is no doubt that Meghan has kicked over the traces of a royal way of life and of the duty that a royal duchess should embark upon once she is a royal duchess, to make money. As she herself admitted, she's done it for financial independence, which, when you're worth over $40 million jointly with your husband, is not financial independence, it's greed. And Wallis was not greedy. She loved luxury, but when the chips were down, she was honourable and she had principles, and if she had to choose between them and money, she chose them over money. I don't think we can say the same of Meghan Markle, because Meghan's one of her guiding principles is money and making money. So that's it.
That's great. I think she did a great choice.
You do.
Oh yeah, I think that it was better. Her well-being and her happiness is a lot better than money,
Yes.
definitely.
And the
I like
irony is, shortly after she divorced Win Spencer, Uncle Saul died, leaving his money to the Home for Fallen Women. I mean, I'm sorry, Mike. You know, it's not funny, but you really do have to laugh. You know.
Still sort of giving it to some women.
Well, she was exactly saying what he thought of Wallis, wasn't he? But for that, Wallis would never have endured all the contumely that she did. She just wouldn't have. Because, you know, everybody would have thought, oh, she's divorced, but she's this great heiress. And, you know, they would have found a way of accommodating her in a way that they did not, because they were able to snare at her and say, oh, she's from nowhere and she's nothing and she's an adventuress and she's a gold digger. Whatever she was not a gold digger. She wasn't. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much, and do keep the questions coming in. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you, and goodbye.